I just asked them to let me sit for a moment, but they kicked me out, laughed at my name. And then the ground beneath them shook, because they forgot who built the mansion. They didn't know my legs had walked every inch of that soil before marble ever touched it. They didn't know my fingers once drew the first sketch of the grand staircase they now pose on. They didn't know. Or maybe they chose to forget. I remember the smell of fresh cement and wood polish. I remember the echo of my father's voice giving orders. And I remember the day they buried him, and me with him, in the silence of legal documents and sealed wills. I wasn't supposed to vanish. I wasn't supposed to be erased. But grief is a quiet killer, and I let it swallow me. My name was on the blueprints, inked in childhood dreams and grown in concrete decisions. But when the lawyers came, my name was left out. Conveniently forgotten. Quietly removed. I was told the inheritance went to them, to my cousins, to the ones who never laid a single brick, never lifted a single stone. I was overseas, working under a different name, too broken to fight back. And they knew it. For 10 years, they turned the mansion into their stage, hosting galas, laughing in embroidered silks, while I watched from across oceans. I never cared for revenge. Not until the day I returned, weary from travel, and asked for one simple thing. Can I sit down for a moment? I said it gently. I said it with folded hands. But they looked me up and down like a roach on their velvet carpet. You? Here? Your kind belongs on the street. They laughed. They mocked my surname. One of them whispered, loud enough for all to hear. I thought we burned that name out of the will. And when I was pushed out, literally shoved, my back striking the pillar my father once carved, I knew. They forgot who built the mansion. But the ground remembered. The foundation remembered. And soon, it would all come tumbling down. I didn't even get past the foyer. The chandeliers I once helped choose now cast shadows on strangers. The floor my mother danced on in bare feet now held the scuff marks of stilettos that had never known struggle. The man who stopped me at the door. His name was Rafi. He used to wash my father's car. Now he was in a tuxedo, holding a glass of champagne, pretending to be one of them. I'm sorry, this is a private event, he said, not even looking me in the eye. I'm not here for the party. I just need to sit for a moment. You'll have to do that somewhere else. I turned to leave, but a familiar voice stopped me cold. Well, look who the wind blew in. Sahir. My cousin. Polished, proud, poisonous. He strutted toward me, arms outstretched, a smile carved in sarcasm. His voice was louder than it needed to be. He wanted everyone to hear. Is that really you, Mirza? Or should I say, Mr. Disappearing Act? A few guests chuckled. I didn't come to argue, I said, keeping my tone steady. I just needed a moment inside. I wasn't expecting to find the doors locked, he finished for me, smirking. Or to be reminded that ghosts don't belong in mansions? The word stung, but I didn't flinch. Behind him, Ariba stepped forward, once my childhood friend, now draped in diamonds I helped buy without even knowing it. You could have at least worn something decent if you planned to crash our celebration, she sneered. I'm not crashing anything, I said. This house is ours, Sahir snapped. Has been for years. You gave it up the day you walked away. I opened my mouth to speak, but then came the final blow. Ariba motioned to security. Two men, thick-necked, stone-eyed, moved toward me like I was filth. I didn't resist. But just before I reached the steps outside, Sahir leaned in, voice dripping venom. You left a decade ago. We made this place what it is now. You're nothing but a name we erased. I turned slowly. And I said just 5 words. The walls remember my name. He laughed. He laughed so hard the room followed. And as I was shoved out into the cold evening wind, one thought burned inside me like fire licking dry wood. Let them laugh. They didn't know what I'd buried beneath the mansion. They didn't know the signature they forged wasn't the last copy. They didn't know about the man I became in exile. The man who didn't just build homes, but broke empires. And they didn't know I never truly left. The foundations still held my truth. And very soon, I'd make them listen. I left the mansion in silence. But silence isn't surrender. It's strategy. They thought I was just another beggar at the gates. They didn't know the man walking away was holding the original architectural blueprints of the estate. They didn't know the land titles still bore an unresolved clause, one I had quietly protected all these years. They didn't know I had spent a decade building my own empire, not in marble and gold, but in power, paper, and people. When I left Pakistan 10 years ago, I was nothing. Just a grieving son, too broken to fight, too naive to understand the claws around me. But the world, it didn't wait for me to heal. So I didn't wait to become dangerous. I built a firm, Miaza Design and Holdings, headquartered in Istanbul, then Dubai, then London. But I never put my name on anything public. I didn't need fame. I wanted reach, access, influence. And when I was ready, I quietly bought out the contractors who had worked on the original estate, one by one. Not with threats, with respect, with debt forgiveness, with loyalty. Then I traced back the forged will, Sahir and Aruba's inheritance. They thought it was airtight. It wasn't. The original will, my father's true last statement, had never been filed. It was intercepted, hidden, but it wasn't destroyed. Because I had something no one else did. The vault key. Not literal, not a chest of gold, but a code. A number sequence. 7 digits my father whispered to me in the hospital, thinking I was asleep. It opened a safety box in Geneva. And inside it was the truth. The letter, my father's handwriting shook on the yellowed paper. To my son, Mirza. If you're reading this, it means the house has been stolen. But remember, I built it, yes. But you are the one meant to guard it. Everything is yours. They may twist the paper, but the stone will always answer to your name. Don't fight with fire. Fight with silence. With patience. The foundations will crack from beneath their feet the moment you whisper back. I stared at those words for hours. Not because I needed to remember them, but because I had already lived them. The trap didn't need to be built. It had already been laid. That first move was invisible. A quiet petition filed in a hidden court, challenging the legality of the inheritance on the grounds of forged witness signatures. Backed by the Geneva letter. Backed by a forensic analyst I'd hired 3 years ago, who had quietly documented Sahir's signature forgery on over half a dozen documents. The second move was financial. I didn't attack them directly. I bought out their debts. Quietly. Through shell firms. The mansion had been mortgaged under Ariba's name, against a high-interest loan she thought she'd never have to repay, thinking the galas and the parties would keep the money flowing. But the firm holding her debt now answered to me. She didn't even notice when her default clause triggered. The house was no longer hers. But I didn't foreclose yet. I waited. Because revenge isn't just about reclaiming what's yours. It's about watching them beg to keep what they stole. I returned one more time. Not through the front gate. Through the old servant's entrance I used to sneak out from as a child. I waited in the shadows of the ballroom, behind the velvet curtains, watching as Sahir toasted himself under the chandelier I once helped hang. Then I stepped into the light. Gasps. Whispers. And silence. He stared at me, glass halfway to his lips. I thought we threw you out, he said, voice tight. You did. Then why are you back? I smiled. Because the ground beneath you has started to shake. And then I handed him a single envelope. Inside it, the foreclosure notice. Signed by his own bank. Stamped by the very company he had laughed off a month ago, not knowing it bore my fingerprints. He turned pale. But I wasn't finished yet. Sahir didn't speak. Not when he read the foreclosure notice. Not when he saw the signatures. Not even when he realized the very land under his feet no longer belonged to him. He simply stood there, still, pale, frozen. I walked past him, slow and deliberate, my footsteps echoing across the marble floor like drum beats in a funeral march. I turned to the crowd. The same people who had laughed with him, mocked me, blocked my path, raised glasses at my humiliation. "Would you like to know who built this mansion?" I asked calmly. They were silent now. I pointed to the corner. The old family photos still hung there, though the frame had dulled over time. "That man," I said, nodding toward my father in the photograph, "laid the foundation with his own hands. That boy beside him, covered in dust, wearing an oversized helmet, that's me." I turned to Ariba. "You said I didn't dress for the occasion. But tell me, does a man need silk to reclaim what was stolen with ink and betrayal?" She opened her mouth, but no words came. I walked past the guests, past their wide eyes and frozen smiles, and gently placed my hand on the staircase railing. I remember when this was just scaffolding. I fell from here once, broke my arm. My father made me swear I'd never stop climbing. He said this house would be my legacy. And I believed him. Then I faced Sahir. I didn't come back to take revenge, Sahir. I came back to finish the promise. He snapped then, voice shaking, trying to claw his way back into control. "You can't do this. This is our home." "No," I said. "This is my inheritance." I pulled the second envelope from my coat. "Your name was never on the original deed. You forged your way into this life. But now the ground beneath you is cracking." In the days that followed, everything fell apart for them. The media caught wind first. Not through me, but through court records, public filings. Heir reclaims empire. Multi-million estate returned after forged inheritance uncovered. Their faces were plastered across headlines. Not as royalty, but as thieves. The people they once entertained stopped answering their calls. Their designer friends ghosted them. Their sponsors withdrew. Even the staff began to leave, many of whom still remembered me as the boy who used to sneak them food during long working hours. I rehired them, not out of pity, but justice. Each of them got better pay. And more than that, respect. Sahir tried to fight back. He hired lawyers. He held press conferences. He even accused me of orchestrating everything through manipulation and lies. But every time he opened his mouth, another piece of truth came out against him. His lies were paper thin. And the more he struggled, the deeper he sank. In court, the judge barely took an hour to rule in my favor. The original will was authenticated. The fake signatures exposed. Every asset transferred. The mansion. The land. The accounts. The properties. Everything he had touched crumbled. He lost it all. Ariba tried to seduce her way back in. She showed up at the estate a week later, wearing a humble dress, eyes watery, voice trembling. "I was just following Sahir's lead," she said. "I never meant to hurt you." I let her talk. I watched her twist her words into apologies. Then I handed her a photograph. It was of my mother's jewelry, the heirlooms she had kept hidden from my father's enemies. They had gone missing after the funeral. Ariba had been the last person in the room. Her face turned to stone. "You didn't just laugh at my name," I said quietly. "You stole from my dead mother." She said nothing. I didn't need her to. I walked her to the gates and said the same words they once said to me. "Your kind doesn't belong here." And I shut the gate. I didn't burn the mansion down. I restored it, room by room. But I left a few things untouched. One cracked mirror in the main hallway, the one Sahir punched when the ruling came in. A broken chandelier crystal from the night I returned. And the pillar I hit when they threw me out. I kept those scars because the mansion needed to remember. And every time a guest asked me why I hadn't fixed them, I simply said, because this house was built with memory, not marble. It wasn't the kind of revenge that ends with fire. It ended in silence. That's what broke them the most. No screaming. No threats. No violence. Just the quiet closing of doors that would never open for them again. The next gala at the mansion was different. No flashing lights. No influencers. No imported wine. Just the original workers. The gardeners. The masons. The men and women who built this place with sweat and calloused hands. Some of them old now, leaning on canes or carried in wheelchairs. We sat in the ballroom. No speeches. No music. Just tea. Simple, humble, warm. I walked up to the old gardener, Baba Ayub, and said, "Would you like to sit where Sahir used to?" He shook his head and pointed to the floor. "I'll sit where your father used to sit. Right here. With the workers." I nodded, and I joined him. 2 months later, the court released the final files regarding my father's will. But inside the envelope was something else. A small, sealed letter addressed not to me, but to them. I didn't open it. I delivered it to Sahir myself at the small rented apartment he now lived in, far from the marble and chandeliers. He opened the letter with shaking hands. I watched his face change. From defiance, to confusion, to tears. "Why are you giving me this?" he asked, broken. "Because it was meant for you," I said. "Even after what I did?" I nodded. Because what the letter said wasn't meant to punish him. It was written by my father, the same man they had betrayed, with a softness that hurt deeper than anger. "Sahir, I don't know what you'll become after I'm gone. But remember this, your blood runs in this house, too. I hope to raise you as a son. I pray you choose the right path. If not, then the house will teach you. And Miaza. He will remember what I tried to forget." Sahir broke down. But I didn't comfort him. Because some weights you carry alone. 1 week later, I made my final move. I signed over the mansion. Not to Sahir. Not to Ariba. But to a foundation in my father's name. A trust built for orphans, widows, and workers who had no voice, no power, no place to belong. The mansion would now be the House of Hands. A living archive of every soul who built it, swept it, repaired it, protected it. The upper halls would remain preserved, a museum of history and legacy. The lower floors? Turned into shelters. Vocational schools. Libraries. I left one room locked, the room I was thrown out of. With a plaque on the door. This door was once closed on a name. It now stands as a warning. Never forget who built the foundation beneath your feet. Sahir moved abroad. He never reached out again. Ariba tried to rebuild her image. She changed her name. But people remembered. The world doesn't forget cruelty the way it forgets kindness. And me? I kept my distance. I never lived in the mansion again. I visited. Sometimes at night. Sometimes at dawn. Just to sit in the garden my mother once watered. Just to hear the silence. And sometimes, I whispered to the walls. "Do you remember me?" And in the rustle of the leaves, in the creak of old wood, I felt the answer. Yes. 1 year later, a journalist interviewed me. She asked what I felt now that I had won. I smiled. "I didn't win," I said. "I just sat down. In the place they swore I'd never belong." She paused, puzzled. Was it worth it? I thought of my father's hands. My mother's voice. The broken boy who stood at the gates. The man who walked out with fire in his silence. And I said, I just asked them to let me sit for a moment, but they kicked me out, laughed at my name. And then the ground beneath them shook because they forgot who built the mansion.